getting that going. So we're going to be jumping back into some product training and walking through a handful of products and things that we offer throughout our platform. And so Ryan and I are going to today, we're going to kind of initially break the ice and talk about RILA products. I don't know exactly how far we're going to get today. A couple years ago, we went through some product training in 2024. So we already have four really great videos that cover the introduction to RILAs, the RILA product, the no fee version, income on a RILA, all of those things. But we're going to review some of it. This is an opportunity for us to lead a training, learn from teaching. So some of you are probably going to get called at some point to lead some trainings. The more that we are leading it instead of just listening to Tyson, the quicker we have to learn, the quicker we're going to be able to grow and become confident in these services. But it also gives then Tyson a break to step away from this. So to get things going, Ryan's going to set the stage. He's going to talk on a few things, and then I'll take over. So Ryan, I'll let you go and let me know when you want me to jump in.
Perfect. Yeah, so setting the stage for the registered index linked annuities, I think it's all drives is all, or I guess the way that this strategy comes into the mix, it all depends on who we're talking to, right? As with any product. So, as we set the stage for this particular training and what Alec and I wanted to cover today, I thought I would just kind of talk about my experience of how I've fit this strategy into my book of business. So I just looked at my numbers, around 4 million in registered index linked annuities, and the lion's share of that is with Allianz. And I think we'll touch on a company here at the end as I transition to Alec. But really, for me in my book and what I've seen, in terms of just collecting that business and closing it, I've just seen the product fit in its own category, and that's what it is. It's not a managed account and it's not a full-on variable annuity. It's kind of in this league of its own, if you will, and that's obviously why it was invented. And so I think it's like anything, like the brand new iPhone that was, clunky and not as efficient at first. It's only gotten better over time. And so, with my book of business and where I've seen it fit in is kind of two big reasons stick out. One is product diversification, and then the second is just, is it competitive with what else the client is invested in? So product diversification is maybe something we're not as in tune with. But what I mean by that is if I've already got a client in managed money, or maybe they've got a lot of managed money through their 401k, or maybe even another advisor. I've got a couple clients like that I've actually been able to snag based on, kind of having a differentiating kind of proposal within this RILA. And so, there's a time and a place to position the strategy in the context of what else the client is doing. So that's first and foremost. You obviously have to understand where the client is at, age, risk tolerance, all the suitability questions that we need to go through. So always comes down to who you're sitting across from, what their goals are, what their time horizons are, and understanding where the marketplace is at the time that you're presenting it. So that's been kind of the other component is competitiveness. And so in some situations, I will have clients that they're coming from, say, a really, really cheap 401k. As you guys know, I have a lot of civilian and government clients coming over from the TSP world, which is the cheapest 401k on planet Earth. It's really hard to compete with that plan just because, while it's passive in nature, and there's no protections in it, it's still uber cheap. I mean, it's basically like buying the SPX index at 3 to 4 basis points. And I mean, they have other investment options, but so in that sense, a no fee RILA can actually compete in that space. And it all depends on where the rates are at the time of the client proposal. But past clients have been able to I've been able to compete with based on the participation rates of the particular product that I choose. So Prudential was one where I, went with them specifically because of the no fee structure and the higher participation rates. So I think those are the two primary things that I've seen in my experience is like I said, product diversification relative to what else they're doing in their portfolio, and then can it compete? With a really inexpensive 401k or equivalent that the client is using, and just being able to present it in a manner where it is a differentiating strategy, which it is. Um, and so that's been my experience with them. I have a couple income-based RILAs, and that's probably its own separate training. But from a competitive standpoint, that's another, I guess, differentiating proposition to, take it to the next level when you've got a retiree that is going to need income off of their asset base. So that's been my experience with them. Alec, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I echo everything that Ryan has said up to this point. Um, I think managed accounts, 401ks, all of those things are great accumulation tools. But where a RILA is probably going to fit most for somebody, like he had said, is a diversification. But then as we get closer to retirement, if there's a need for income, it's a vehicle that we can use to then generate guaranteed income. So really, those are probably the two routes to go. Some type of downshift of market exposure or risk reduction, and then an opportunity to then purchase then lifetime income for somebody. So from that point, where can we go? What can we do? But how do they work? And that kind of sets the stage. I don't know if I'm able to share my screen here. I can. So I'm going to share my screen and show you exactly what this looks like. So for today's training, at the very least, I'm just going to look up Allianz's rate sheet. And from there, I want you all to be able to know exactly how I found this. To pull this up, I did not need to have an account with RILA or with Allianz. I didn't need to have a login. I don't need to be appointed. Everything that I've pulled up here, all of you can go and do this right now. And if you're watching the training in the future, you can literally go here now and get current rates at the time that you watch this. So I just went to Google and typed in Allianz Index Advantage rate sheet. The Index Advantage is the product. And then from here, I can just click on this Index Advantage Plus overview. And then I scroll down a little bit to these three boxes under Run the Numbers. You can click on See Our Current Rates. So how this works, more likely than not, someone coming to us where we're going to present a RILA strategy is we're looking to de-risk their portfolio or then show some income options. And so it's easy to segue for someone to explain to a client to say, hey, what you currently have, maybe you're a 401k where you've got a managed account and we got some type of an asset allocation of, let's call it 75% stocks, 25% bonds. And they say, hey, I'm in my mid 50s or I'm in my early 60s, or wherever they're at in life. But they say, hey, maybe I'm in a position where I want to take a downshift in risk, but I want to maybe still be able to participate with the market. I went back over the weekend and watched one of the first training from 2024 that we talked about RILAs. And the big thing is, hey, we're trying to maybe meet the market, the S&P 500, But if we're in a managed account or your 401k, we're going to have some fixed income in there to give some type of risk reduction. But because we do that, we're immediately going to take a downshift in performance. So, how can we present something to a client where we can continue to have market exposure, but not have to take on the reduction of performance? And that's where a RILA product's going to come in. So, I'm gonna walk through how I walk through with a client. So you can see in this case with Allianz, they've got 6 year time frame investments, 3 year, and then 1 year strategies. So I'm going to first focus on the 1 year term. So when these had first come out, you have all of these different indexes up here on the top columns that we can invest into. And initially, we were able to work with 1 year strategies. And so it's very simple to show a client and say, hey, we've got the S&P 500 index. And over a 1 year time frame, we're going to have two things that we're able to do. The first is we're going to participate in the market up to a certain cap. So I'll say, hey, in this case, we can get up to 23.75% of whatever the market does. So if the market goes up 18%, you'll get 18%. If the market goes up 30%, you'll be capped out at 23.75%. But simultaneously, this is over a 1 year time frame. Simultaneously, though, between now and a year from now, if the market goes down, Allianz is going to take on the first 10% of the market downturn, or there's in this case how it be vocalized as a 10% buffer. Meaning, in a year, if the market's down 5%, you actually do not take a loss. If the market's down 11%, you then take a 1% loss. Typically, that is something that someone can follow along. People have heard of the S&P. They understand, okay, hey, I've got kind of some guardrails in place. But then what can we do over and above that? And that's where we focus on these 3 year and then 6 year strategies. But depending on what the client's goals, risk tolerance, and understanding is of how all of this works, will then help us frame what we'll put our client in. So just because something might be advantageous for your understanding, make sure what you're doing is according to what the client's goals and needs are. So once someone can understand that 1 year time frame, that's when we can kind of expand and say, hey, because Allianz knows that they have your money for a 6 year time frame, we can now go out into the market and have 3 and 6 year investment strategies. Because what we're doing is we're going out into the options market and purchasing options to set these guardrails. Now, in my case, probably 4 out of 5 clients, when I start talking about mentioning the word options, they're like, hey, I don't get it, but I understand the S&P. I understand I can get up to a certain amount and there's some type of downside protection. And so just like we would talk about a managed account, let's have kind of a basis of what we would normally present to a client. For the person that needs a little more info, we're able to do that. For the person that wants a little bit more of a high level overview, we can maybe downshift how much we talk about. So at that point, I probably wouldn't tell them about the options market and how that's priced and all those things. But the easiest thing to then explain is, hey, the longer we have a time horizon to invest, the more favorable options we're going to get of how much we can earn in the market. So in a 6 year time frame, because your account's going to be there for 6 years, in this case with the S&P 500, we are uncapped, meaning over that 6 year time frame, every bit of growth that the S&P 500 will get, you are also going to get. But simultaneously, then during that time frame, if the market does go down, you still have a 10% buffer. But then the next thing to then talk about in these 3 and 6 year timeframes is a participation rate. I simply explain that by saying if it's over 100%, that means you're going to get credited more than the market. So in this case, it's 110%. So I say, hey, if the market goes up 100% over that time frame, you will actually get credited in your account 110%. If the market goes up 10%, you're going to get credited 11. Simple as that. It doesn't need to be more complicated. Most people are going to understand that. So why this is valuable is where we explain the buffer, where we talk about participation rates and where we can compare it to a managed account. So in a managed account, you're riding the wave of the market. And many people are okay with that. They don't know a difference. But this is where we can explain to someone, hey, because we're in just the S&P 500, this is equivalent to you being 100% allocated into equities, which we can't stomach right now in your managed account or 401k. And so this allows for us to diversify from kind of everything you have all together. And instead of taking on some fixed income in your account, we can downshift the risk exposure while simultaneously keeping you exposed to the market. So I want to take a pause here and see if any of you have questions about anything we've talked about up to this point.
Just one remark, Alec. I don't think we really touched on, whether this is a strategy for qualified or non-qualified, but in general, since we're in an annuity right out of the gate, we're making this money, protected from taxes. So if you've already got an IRA, you're kind of just doubling down on that characteristic. So you have to be mindful of obviously liquidity for every client that we're looking at this for. So if it is non-qualified, there obviously has to be a liquidity check, and TFA obviously has those rules in place. So just wanted to make that one mention is majority of this, at least in my experience, is this is something that we can use for a it can be used for both, but the majority of what I've been using it is for qualified money.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we can put any type of money into it. In fact, I actually sat in, at the time of the recording in a meeting yesterday, that we are potentially looking to put in non-qualified money. Why that's valuable is if you have a managed account with a managed taxable account, every year you're getting a 1099 and then having to pay taxes on any movement in the account or any growth in the account. Where if we put non-qualified money in here, you actually do not pay capital gains on that money until you take it out. So that's a great tax deferral for people. People are very happy with that. So there's one more thing I want to talk about on the specific strategies that we work with, before I kind of move on to a next topic. So the thing that I would cover, it's not for everybody, but for you to understand and for our recording here, is this dual precision strategy. So I'm going to come back down to the 1 year time frames. So how a dual precision works is it's a trigger rate, meaning in the S&P 500 index, currently you can get 10.8% credited to your account over a 1 year time frame. So what this is for the client is, there's two layers to it. So the first is, as long as the market is up, flat or up, you'll get credited this 10.8%. So the market could earn 0.0 or even 0.01 over a 1 year time frame, and the client will get credited 10.8%. Market could be up 8, they get 10.8. Market could be up 35, they get credited 10.8. But then the dual precision, meaning we also have a 10% buffer on the downside. And so in this case, as long as the market doesn't lose more than 10%, market could be down 9.99%, and the client would get credited a positive 10.8%. So why that is so big is, think of clients you might have, or sitting with a client that says, hey, I'm a little nervous about the market. We obviously, in this case, have some 20% buffers, 30% buffers, but we also have, hey, maybe we have a slightly negative year in the market. You'll actually get credited a positive return in that case, and you'll get rewarded for that. You can even see a catastrophic year in a 30% down market in 1 year. The client would actually get credited 6.9% if the market does not go down more than 30%. So this allows for us to mix and match certain strategies in here, really anywhere where there's a number that reflects a strategy that we can invest into. And so what are maybe the 2 to 3, maybe, up to 4 or 5 strategies that make sense for the client? We don't want to put a little bit of everything in there, but what are the couple that make sense? And so this can really allow for us to hedge against some potential downside, returns in the market, but also allow for them to stay allocated in equities for a longer period of time than they otherwise would on their own or in a managed account. So moving forward, then beyond what we can invest into, something that's very valuable inside of a RILA product is what's called lock and go again. So I actually performed this yesterday for about 5 of my clients. And what we're able to do is the market's up during a certain period of time. So like, let's focus on this 1 year S&P 500 index. Maybe we're halfway through that 1 year time frame and the market's up 20%, the client's account is credited 15%. In this case, what we're able to do is say, hey, we want to lock in these gains while they're of value. And we're able to jump right back into the market the very next day. So I called a number of clients yesterday in these accounts and said, hey, you're up 25%, you're up 20, you're up 10. I locked in probably over $100,000 of gains in client accounts, and they are immediately invested right back into the market today. Why that's valuable is when we look at these buffers here, they're reflected in a percentage, but they're also reflected in a dollar value. So if we put $100,000 into an account and there's a 10% buffer, there's a $10,000 protection on your account. Let's say the account is up 15%, meaning in your account, in the client account, it shows that there's $115,000 in there. If we lock in that gain, 10% on 115,000 is now $11,500. So that's an easy way to show the client the bigger your account gets and the more we can lock in gains along the way, the bigger dollar value that is reflected in this 10% buffer. We can get to a point if we lock it in multiple times over a year, 2, 3 years, we can very easily get to a point where that buffer will actually raise above what we initially put into the account. And we can now show them, hey, as long as we don't go below the buffer, you're actually playing with kind of house money at that point because we're over and above what you put in. And so we're protecting even now the gains that you've gotten into your account. So that process has evolved over time. We initially were able to only lock in 1 time a year, and then it went up to 3 times a year, and now it's 12 to 30. I think it's 13 times a year that you can lock your account. So 12 times you can lock and jump right back in. And so it's valuable to review this with your client, review where things are at. Is it favorable? How does that operate and work? Which is probably a further conversation, but allows for us to further lock in gains, take care of the client, and make sure this account is growing along the way. In the last, 24 months, we've seen a pretty steady growth in the economy. And so locking in gains along the way is a really good help for the client that people can now get even better rates of return, and we're able to show, hey, because we've locked in the market over a certain time frames up 40%, but your account is actually up 57 because we've locked in and continue to get better returns and better growth opportunities. So there's a lot that we can do here. The more complicated that you make it out to be, the more complicated it will seem. But when you can understand things from a 1 year time frame, and then expand that out to the buffer strategies, the 3 year and 6 years, and participation rates, all of a sudden this becomes a lot less complicated than it needs to be. So again, I want to pause here for any questions, comments, or thoughts.
Maybe maybe you're gonna get into it, maybe not. But Ryan said something about a no fee version of this. I mean, outside of the surface level, one has a fee and one doesn't. What's the what's the benefits or the downside to doing one or the other?
Yeah, so I was actually just looking at Allianz's no fee version this morning, and the primary trade-off is the participation rate. So for the no fee version, I believe it's just a straight 100% par rate. Um, so nothing above and beyond. Yeah, thanks, Alec.
Yeah,
So
so currently in the 6 year with a 10% buffer, it's 110%. And then coming over here, the no fee version is just 100%. So the big thing is going to be for Allianz's sake, the participation rates are what you're essentially buying. And there have been months, depending these, you can see up here, the rates are renewed monthly. So there have been months where it actually is not very favorable to go to the fee route. And sometimes it's very favorable. So I've seen this participation rate as high as 125, 130, 135%, where you can see, in the fee version, it was 110%. So the gap is a little closer. And so it might not be as favorable.
What's the normal fee for this?
For this product, it's 1.25%. And then when we get to talking about income, their income fee is then 0.7%. So if someone just has the RILA product, it's 1.25, or if you then do the income attached to it, it'd be 1.95%.
Hmm.
Yeah, any other questions?
No, I do you have the fee no fee side by side, Alec? I see the no fee pulled up.
I don't think I can do them side by side.
Well, um, can you pull up the no fee and we can go back and forth because I just want to do a little compare and contrast for you guys.
So this
So
is currently the no fee.
correct. So let's just look at two numbers. They're all a little bit different, but like you already covered one of them, which is 100% participation on the 6 year versus the 110 on the fee. So that's a tighter spread than it's been. I mean, a lot of us have accounts with 125, 130, or maybe a bit higher than that participation rates on the fee versions. And I mean, to make it up, I think a year ago, maybe the fee version was 130 and the no fee might have been like 105. I mean, it was a big enough difference to really matter.
Mhm.
But and I'm not an expert in options, but a lot of it has to do with long dated options and short dated options. Essentially, the 6 year terms are a lot tighter right now. But if you look at the 1 year terms, there's still a decent difference. So, like you scroll down on this chart to that dual precision that you covered, let's look
Yeah.
at the 10% trigger rate is 8.9% on the no fee. Now let's look at the fee version. And before he pulls it up, what I'm going to bet, oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good way of toggling, is that it'll be greater than 1.25. So if you add 1.25 fee to 8.9, that'd be what? 10 point, uh, two, wait, 1.25 to 8.9 would be 10.15, right? So in other words, on the 1 year terms, if you pay a 1.25 fee, your odds of getting essentially you're going to more than pay for the fee, assuming the market doesn't drop by more than 10%. So what Allianz will tell you is that the fee version is going to outperform the fee version most of the time. There's going to be examples, just like there's examples where an aggressive portfolio will underperform a conservative portfolio, like if we pick it down here. But over time, an aggressive portfolio is going to outperform a moderate portfolio. Well, it's the same thing here. Over time, a fee version is going to perform better. The no fee version is just really a marketing thing because that's where the industry is gravitating. It's easier to sell a no fee product. So my whole stance on it is if I'm primarily using, first of all, look at the difference. Sometimes it's a bigger difference than not others, like we just reviewed. But if I feel like the fee is material to the case in terms of fee sensitivity of the prospect or maybe a competitive situation that we're going up against, and Alec and Shane and I presented that yesterday, where I think fees are an issue. We presented the no fee, but it's an easy pivot to go to the fee. In fact, a lot of clients I've compared and contrasted both, and they've chosen, and most of the time they choose the fee product. But I do like the versatility we have at Allianz to go back and forth between the two, where, Prudential, you're just at no fee. Jackson, who I don't recommend you use, is just no fee, so on and so forth.
So how would you reconcile the 6 year? Um, is it just a simple 1.25 over 6 years and then evaluating the spread on the crediting or the participation rate?
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at it right now, and it will depend a little bit on what kind of growth you get over 6 years. See, it's impossible to compare apples to apples because the big variable is how often are you locking and resetting it, right?
Yeah.
But if you just bought this and put it in a shelf for 6 years, so get your calculator out and take 1.25 times six. What is that? It should be 7.5, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So if you just put this in a shelf for 6 years, your fee version is going to net 102.5% of the S&P, because you're getting 110 minus the fee, cumulatively, where the no fee is going to net 100. So for that 2.5% over 6 years, like, I'm probably going to go no fee on that. If I'm primarily going to use that product. But this is an impossible apple to apples comparison because that fee product is probably going to track, not probably, but something with a higher participation rate is going to track interim value a little ahead of something without a participation rate. I mean, it's just the nature of how that works. So you're going to have a little more lock-in opportunities on a fee version probably than a no fee. So I honestly, you could make a great case either way. I don't think there's a definitive. But I'll tell you what Allianz claims, and I have no reason to not believe them, but they claim to price everything agnostic to a 15% profit margin. In other words, they're basically saying, hey, we want to make 15% of, the profitability across the board, or maybe it's 15 basis points, I think is what it is, not 15%. Is that what you remember, Alec? Because I think you were
15 basis points.
15 basis points. So they're basically doing everything at their cost plus 15 basis points. So that's just where the market is right now, right? I mean, I think sometimes the participation rates look really attractive, and sometimes they're not so attractive. But maybe one other thing I'd say is I think sometimes we ask ourselves the question, like, here's a question. It was a big rollover. I just rolled over 1.6 million with a client last week, and this client doesn't need the income. We've already got income riders. He's one of my higher net worth clients, and so basically, I'm just setting up an FMAX account, and because I don't really need an income rider, we've got plenty of other sources of capital where we don't need any distributions from this account. I mean, the guy is 55 years old. So, we're a couple of decades away from RMDs. In fact, RMDs will probably be, at 75 or higher by the time he gets there. So the question is, am I better off doing some in a RILA, some in an advisory account? Well, I think if participation rates were 130 or 140, that's a real interesting question, because can I guarantee that FMAX is going to outperform the S&P by 130 bips? Well, on one hand, I certainly can't guarantee that. On the other hand, I'm not picking up the dividend on a RILA. So, on that dollar size, fees are probably the same. In fact, he's probably paying less than 1.25, and not probably, I guarantee you he's probably paying 1% out the door on his FMAX account without looking at it because of rate points. So the Allianz account would actually be a little higher fee, and we're not getting a dividend. I just my feeling on all of this is that I'm going to use a RILA when I need to, if I need an income stream, or I have a client that otherwise wouldn't invest primarily in equities. I think Alec and Ryan, you guys did a nice job of teeing that up early in this meeting. But if I'm just growing an asset, I just like the versatility of an advisory account because now I'm not in bed with an insurance company. I'm not hamstrung to their renewal rates the next 6 years. I just there's a little more versatility and flexibility there. And I think over time, especially with how we're building, advisory accounts on FMAX, I think it's going to do a little bit better. So I still think annuities are where you need income guarantees or that downside protection. I think we had a little honeymoon period there with the pricing of options where we were getting 140% participation rates. And that's pretty enticing, right? It's kind of like we had a honeymoon period of mortgage rates, right? I have a 3% mortgage on my house, right? It's pretty awesome compared to what I could get today, right? So, there's going to be those anomalies in time, but I think the way these things are priced right now is a little bit more probably what we're looking at moving forward the next couple of years. Our Prudential just wholesaler just last week told Joe and I that their experience is that these RILAs aren't quite as profitable as they forecasted them to be. And I just think this marketplace has gotten so competitive that companies are having to put a lot of money into constant. I mean, how much money do you think it cost Allianz to develop a lock and go again feature? I mean, you can't call Salesforce and buy that off the shelf, right? How much did it cost Prudential to match them? And how much does it cost them to get these wholesalers on the road constantly whining and dining advisors trying to get their attention? I mean, it's like their margins are thin on this stuff. They got to do massive volume. And I just think you're going to see that reflected in now that interest rates are coming back down a little bit. I'm not anticipating seeing 125, 130, 140% participation rates on these. And so, they're great tools when you need that downside protection. And they're going to slaughter a moderate account, that otherwise would own a bunch of bonds. But I do think apples to apples, I still like a variable account, an advisory account or something over something like this.
I have a guy that this is just a, uh, um, I guess, scenario ongoing right now that came in and he was a he won a progressive jackpot on Keno. And it's like 680 grand or something, and he's gonna net like 350 or whatever. And he's got to pay some, obviously, after all the taxes and other stuff and whatever. He's talking about having somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 270 to do something with. He's 52 years old. He still works, does construction. But in terms of saving and like retirement stuff, he doesn't have a pot to piss in. So I've known this guy for a long time. He's terrible with money. So we had a conversation, about like I did a moderate aggressive portfolio on FMAX and talked to him about that. But in his case, is it like just thinking long term, like if he decides that he wants to try to maybe retire at 65, 66 years old when Social Security happens and maybe we let this, like you let this build for the next 12, 13 years and then maybe pivot to something like this because of the income aspect? Is that kind of like, am I on the right frame of thinking?
What do you guys think?
I'm sorry.
I mean, before I give my answer, what do the rest of you guys think, Alec or Ryan or Lisa?
I think if he's got nothing else saved, his his liquidity would be first and foremost. What is that?
Hmm.
What does that actually end up being in terms of what you have to work with once he pays down debts, buys another Keno ticket, all that.
Yeah, no, and that was the big thing, like from a liquidity stance, because like he called me and he's like, "What do you know about annuities?" And I'm like, "Everything," even though the answer is very little. But yeah, obviously comparing an advisory account to something like this, um, I didn't
Do
really
you
take
feel
the
like you've
cost.
got this guy handled where he's going to come in and do whatever you say, or do you think he's like talking to other
I'm like,
people?
I think he's, yeah, 85, 90% gonna be on board with whatever I suggest. Uh,
Do you think there's any other advisors he's talking to that are trying to get in there?
oh, there is. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime somebody
So
says, "What do you know about annuities?" that's coming from somebody else recommending him something.
100%, yeah. And he told me, and I mean, I just asked him. I said, "Why the hell did you have a guy from Ashland come and talk to you?" I clicked on something on the internet, blah 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 blah.
Oh, geez.
But the other reason I think he will is because this is a side note, but this has also led into his girlfriend having 180,000 in an old 403b that is just sitting at her job because she still works in the same place, but they outsourced the company that her actual job description at the hospital. One of the mercy things. So yeah, I mean, he's waiting on the check to arrive, which should be this week, and I'm when we were chatting, I left it at I don't think an annuity is like the best option for you right now, but potentially something to look into because of the income options.
Do you actually have the money yet?
You should have the check this week.
Do you have a time set with him to get back in here?
Not definitively, no. It's just he came in, and when he gets the check, we're gonna reconvene.
If I were you, I'd be all over getting him back in, whether he has a check or not, because I promise you, there's other wolves out there trying to get their
So get it,
on
yeah.
him.
Well, you and I can talk about it after this.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think my answer would be I'd do an F max no matter what to piggyback on Ryan, but just versatility, liquidity, and I think on top of that, it allows you to position yourself as an advisor, not an annuity salesman. I mean, to take a step back, like guys, when we lead as advisors and then we bring in, hey, I think we need to up your life insurance or we need to use an annuity to accomplish a specific goal. It's just received very differently than if you're leading with a product. And believe it or not, here we are all these years later. A lot of people in our industry are still leading with a product, and so you have an opportunity to really distinguish yourself as, hey, we're an investment advisory firm, and we use all of these tools where necessary, but our job is to, as fiduciaries, give you advice that best meets your needs, that are in your best interest, and that is not the experience you're going to get in a lot of other places. And anyway, I've experienced that a few times in the last just month here with some weird client scenarios. But there's a lot of people out there that are just looking to make a buck, guys. And I'm proud of the way we do it, but we can't leave anything to chance. Anybody else? I've got to hop on another Zoom here in a couple minutes. Any other thoughts for today on the RILA or any other questions? Well, guys, I hope you continue being students of the business and use these recordings for your own value because, um, because one thing I just do, I don't really do it consciously. It's just become habit is I'm just constantly staying in tune with financial news, with products. I just, because anything that you're not repeatedly checking into or revisiting or you're not repeatedly presenting to people, you're going to get rusty on. Um, I did a meeting yesterday with Alec and Shane, and by my own analysis at the end, I think I could have done a better job. The guy showed up 45 minutes early when Alec was and I were literally just starting to sit down and revisit a couple of things that we had prepared like a month ago for him. So I'll give all of us a little pass on that. But honestly, I didn't do a bad job, and I hold myself to a high standard. But I think I could have explained the RILA a little clearer. And I just think Guys, I'm in the same boat you guys are. Like when you're only explaining something once a month or once every 3 months, it's just not going to be as clear. And one of the pitfalls of this RILA is, especially when somebody that's more seasoned than you, whether it's one of us or it could be a wholesaler, that all they do is explain this, they make it sound so logical and easy to follow, and then you think in your brain, hey, this is an easy thing to explain to somebody else, where in fact it's not. And everybody listens to things differently, everybody receives information differently. I mean, I have some clients that just really struggle with understanding what I consider to be incredibly basic concepts. Um, and we just have to, so we have to own what we can control, which is our product knowledge, so that our minds are freed up to pay attention to our prospects and ask ourselves, okay, he's asking me this, but what's he really asking? Is he really asking this actual question, or is what's under the surface here? And that's because that's where business is won or lost is that kind of stuff. And so product knowledge is something that we can own 100%. And that's just something that needs to be reviewed and revisited. And guys, my whole business is advisory accounts, a couple kinds of variable annuities, and a couple kinds of life insurance. That's it. Like, I mean, there's three or four biggies and another four or five kind of like, you know, semi frequently used products. And that's it. I'm not doing 35 things with all my clients, guys. I'm doing the same core things over and over and over again. So that's my challenge to you, is continue your mastery on this. It's part of winning here. And we'll keep the conversation going next week.